Welcome back to the College Basketball Bracket Science YouTube channel, your encyclopedia for the college basketball season. We got a fun episode prepared today. We're going to dive in to our new power rankings for every single power conference, the Big 12, Big East, SEC, ACC, Big 10. We're going to talk about all the teams in all these conferences. We'll go through them, talk about some of their resumes, talk about some of their KenPom numbers in terms of the computer, what their net standing is. We're going to go through all of this in today's show. We have a pretty slow week ahead of us, unfortunately. Saturday is huge, but we'll have another show before we discuss on Saturday, so we're not going to preview those games. Talk about a few games going this week. We had some big results the past couple days, some ranked teams falling. No crazy slate of games, so we're not going to dive too deep into those. So the main heart of our show today is going to be these power rankings. We'll talk about some of the KenPom predictions, the predictive records for these teams in their respective conferences. Usually it's pretty accurate. I give KenPom credit. KenPom has become one of the biggest computer algorithms out there in all of sports, not just college basketball. Very realistic. We'll compare and contrast where my power rankings are to where KenPom has them predicted. So we'll go over all of that stuff. I mean, my power rankings are not just based on the computers. It's kind of just a combination of the computers, resume, and also just eye test, So the AP poll also came out today, and this is the Week 6, the special Week 6. Remember that stat that we talked about a lot last year? The top 12 in the Week 6 AP poll is the most important. For some reason, the past 20 national champions have been ranked inside the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. So we'll talk about what it seems, if history repeats itself, the only teams that have a chance to win the national championship. Be sure, before we dive into it, to like and subscribe. Follow us on social media at Bracket Science with 2 S's. And, of course, check out our website, bracketscience.org. So before we dive into these power rankings, we're going to quickly, and I mean real quickly, go through some of the results. We saw some more ranked teams fall, so we got to talk about it. Starting on December 6th, which was Friday, number 19, Illinois traveled to Northwestern and got beat in overtime, 70-66. Brooks Barnheiser, nice game there. Matthew Nicholson had some key blocks. Illinois drops the Big Ten wide open right now. Quickly, still going through it. Number 4, Kentucky picked up yet another huge win on Saturday on December 7th not at number 7 Gonzaga, but in Seattle. So it was more of a home court for Gonzaga. 92-89, as once again noted, in overtime. Kentucky trailed by 18 at one point. Mark Pope, what an incredible start to the season for Mark Pope. Kentucky fans, I said that we should give Mark Pope a bye year. This is unbelievable what he is doing early in the season. Teams with this many transfers should not click and be as cohesive as this team is. Do not take it for granted what Mark Pope is doing right now. It is absolutely incredible. To do it this soon just shows his potential and what the Kentucky program might continue to build to be. Another ranked-on-ranked matchup, a good game. Number 11, Wisconsin traveled to number 5, Marquette. Remember, Wisconsin got him last year in the battle for Wisconsin. Marquette got him this year, 88-70. Cam Jones over another 30-point game. He has been spectacular. Flying around the rest of the nation, Butler lost at number 17, Houston, in blowout fashion, 79-51. St. John's trailed by 4 at the half to Kansas State and ended up beating them by 17. That is the Kansas State team this year. They are horrible. They will be towards the bottom of our Big 12 rankings. We will talk about Ohio State dismantled Rutgers 80-66. In even more dismantling fashion, Michigan State blew out Nebraska 89-52. Michigan starts off 2-0 under Dusty May, beating Iowa 85-83. Rhode Island beat Providence in the battle for the state 69-63. Why is this important, you may ask? Rhode Island, one of the few undefeated teams left. I think we have 8 remaining. Rhode Island gets the job done. Clemson went to Miami and beat them 65-55. Miami is 3-6. They are horrible this year. It's looking like Jim Larinaga's last year there. I think he is going to retire. St. Mary's went to Utah and beat them 72-63. The game was not that close. St. Mary's blew them out from the get-go. Colorado got revenge on Colorado State in a rivalry game from last year, beating them 72-55. And then NC State beat Florida State in overtime 84-74. Moving on to Sunday, the big one was number 1 Kansas dropping their second straight game at Missouri, 76-67. They trailed by 24 at one point, fought all the way back, got it to a one-possession game, but Missouri Tamar Bates had an incredible game. They knock them off. Number 8, Purdue held off Maryland at home 83-78. Duke traveled to Louisville and beat them 76-65. UCLA picked up a huge win thanks to a bank Dylan Andrews 3 near the buzzer, 73-71 to knock off number 12 Oregon. The most surprising game of the day was Arkansas State traveling to number 16 Memphis and beating up on them, quite frankly, 85-72. Number 22 Texas A&M beat Texas Tech 72-67. Texas A&M off to a sneaky good start. I know I talk a lot bad about Texas A&M, but they are off to a good start. They're terrific defensively. Their offense is ugly. It makes me want to scratch my eyes out, but they're winning games. They look pretty good. Their defense is real. If they can get the ball in the hoop, they are a terrific basketball team when they're not turning the ball over. Number 25 UConn traveled to Texas and beat up on them 76-65. It's about time we have a real talk about Rodney Terry's future in Texas. Vanderbilt took on TCU in Fort Worth. Vanderbilt got the job done 83-74. Vanderbilt off to a great start. Now, we're not going to talk about these games too much because we're going to talk about these individual teams, and these games will be brought up. Let's move into the ACC. Without further ado, let's dive into the power rankings.
Power rankings.
All right, so the graphic pulled up on YouTube. The number one ranked team in the ACC power rankings, without a doubt, the Duke Blue Devils. Duke off to a 7-2 start this year. Their losses came on a neutral site to Kansas in that game, and then on that neutral site to Kentucky. As John Shire has done, and Mike Krzyzewski, of course, also did, they always play a tough non-conference schedule. They have that home win against Auburn. They went to Arizona and beat them. That win's continuing to age poorly, but they also just traveled to Louisville and got a win there. KenPom predicts them to go 18-2 in the ACC. That's how high they are ranked. They are third overall at KenPom right now, first in the ACC, of course. Number 2, we have Clemson. Clemson climbing up. Now, I will admit I was a little lower on Clemson than most coming into this season. Brad Brownell just does it. He gets the job done. Their only loss this year, they are 9-1. Their only loss was was at Boise State early in the year in their 4th game of the year. Since then, they have beaten San Francisco, Penn State, which is continuing to age great. Then the big one was this week where they took down Kentucky at home, and then, as mentioned, they traveled to Miami and beat down on Jim Laranaga's team. Ian Shiflin has been fantastic. Chase Hunter has been fantastic. Victor Lakin has filled in just fine. Clemson off to a 9-1 start. They are projected to finish second in the ACC with a 15-5 record. And they are currently ranked 18th at KenPom in total. At third, North Carolina. North Carolina off to a really rocky start this season. 5-4 to start the year. Now, with that being said, they don't really have any bad losses. They lost at Kansas early in the year. Remember that game, 92-89. They really fought back and showed a lot of potential in that one. No one wins at Kansas, and they almost did. Fine with that, then they picked up a win over Dayton in Maui, which got them off to a 4-1 start, but then they dropped 3 in a row. They lost to Auburn, nothing wrong with that, lost by 13. I think Auburn's the best team in the country. They lost to Michigan State in overtime on a neutral floor, 94-91, and then they hosted Alabama in the ACC-SEC Challenge and just ran out of their own building, quite frankly, 94-79. They're currently ranked 30th at KenPom, not off to a great start in that one. We know the backcourt talent. We know it's there. R.J. Davis, Seth Trimble, Elliot Cadeau. With that being said, R.J. Davis has not been shooting too well this year. That's a discussion for another time. He's shooting 45% on twos and only 24% on threes this year. Seth Trimble's really stepped up, but they just really are lacking in the front court. As mentioned, they are currently 30th at KenPom in total. They have a projected record of 13-7, which is good for 4th. The 4th team I have, which is projected 3rd in the ACC by KenPom, they're currently 8-2 on the year. Projected 14-6 at KenPom is the Pittsburgh Panthers. Pitt got off to a blazing hot start, climbed all the way up to number 5 in the first net rankings. They have since dropped. They're currently 31st overall at KenPom. They have that loss on a neutral floor to Wisconsin in the Greenbrier, and then they just got blitzed at Mississippi State where they dropped a lot in the net. And they also dropped a lot at KenPom, so they're 8-2. Notable wins. That win at Ohio State is going to prove to be huge. They just beat Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech stinks, but still a win. They also beat West Virginia badly, 86-62. Then they did beat LSU as well on a neutral floor, which is LSU also proving to be a little better of a team than you might have thought coming into the year. In fifth, I have the North Carolina State Wolfpack coming off of their Final Four run. I was a little lower on them as well coming into this year, mainly because I was a little higher on some of these other teams. I had Miami ahead of them, Wake Forest ahead of them. But NC State's proven to be kind of consistent. They're 6-3 to start the year, nothing too spectacular. But they're currently 70th at KenPom. Not great. Their losses have come on a neutral floor to Purdue, on a neutral floor to BYU, and at home against Texas, that Texas team that just got blown out by UConn on their home floor. They do have that big win over Florida State, which we just talked about. They also beat Colgate earlier in the year, but other than that, not really any quality wins. So it's still kind of hit or miss on NC State as of right now. I just thought they were kind of the safest pick to be in that 5 spot for the ACC. They're currently 70th at KenPom, as mentioned, and they are projected to go 11-9 in conference play. At number 6, I did keep Wake Forest. Man, this has been the most disappointing team in all of college basketball. And you say that, and they're 8-3 to start and really don't have any bad losses. So 6 might seem low. It might seem high to some people, depending on where you're at. They're 109th at KenPom right now. That is horrible. That's not a tournament team as of right now. Now, they had that random win against Michigan early in the year, and Michigan is up to top 15 in the AP poll, as we'll talk about that here in a little bit. They got that win over Michigan. You're thinking, man, this team is going to be legit, and then it's just been bad. They got off to a 4-0 start. Lost at Xavier 75-60 in blowout fashion. Took care of Western Carolina and Detroit Mercy, barely 13-point, 10-point wins in that one. Then they played a neutral floor game against Florida and got bamboozled 75-58. Then they beat Minnesota, a bad Minnesota team, on a neutral floor by 6. Then they played Texas A&M at Texas A&M and scored 44 points. They're continuously getting worse in the offensive department. Florida, they scored 58 points. Minnesota, 51. Texas A&M, 44. They had a better game last game against Boston College, where they picked up a win, 72-66 at home. But yeah, if you'd have told me Boston College going to Wake Forest only resulted in an 8-point spread, I'd have thought Wake Forest would have been favored by 15, 16 in that game. Wake Forest ended up winning by 6. So they're 8-3. They have that win over Michigan, but not showing signs of improvement right now. They got James Madison, Clemson coming up. So 2 not cake games whatsoever. They're 8-3. They're currently projected to finish 8-12 at KenPom. That's what the numbers are saying. Ranked 109th. They haven't been good. They got some things to figure out. I mean, they got Hunter Salas. They got a good roster. We'll see if they can get the job done. Now, my 7th team, ranked 5th at KenPom, though, in terms of the ACC standings, is SMU, Andy Enfield's squad. They're 8-2 to start the year, 53rd at KenPom. Pretty good stuff there. Their losses have come to Butler. Their losses have also came at home to Mississippi State. Remember that game. So SMU 8-2. Not really any notable wins. They beat Virginia, Washington State. Neither of those two are tournament teams. Losses Mississippi State, Butler. Still kind of one of those teams that's up in the air. Now they do have a big one against LSU on a semi-home game. So that's one of those to keep an eye on in that one. At number 8, I have the Stanford Cardinal climbing up. I should have trusted Kyle Smith a little more in the preseason. Now they have a bad loss. We'll talk about that here in a second. But they're 8-2 to start the year, 80th in KenPom. Kyle Smith is fantastic. Kyle Smith with Maxime Reynaud as a stud. Yeah, I should have had them a little bit higher. They look pretty good. They have a win over Santa Clara, Norfolk State, and Cal. Their losses came to Grand Canyon. Nothing wrong with that one on a neutral floor. And then at home against Cal Poly. That's the tough one. That's the tough one that's going to kill them come March, unless they have a really good ACC play. But they're 8-2, off to a somewhat solid start. They are projected to go an even 10-10. And quite frankly, that might not be good enough in the ACC. We're talking about teams in the SEC that might go, do they play 18? They either play 18 or 20 games. I think they're the only one that plays 18 games still. So you have someone that goes 7-11 in the SEC versus someone that goes 10-10 in the ACC. They're going to look back at that SEC-ACC challenge where the SEC won 14-2. We'll see. At number 9, I do have the Louisville Cardinal. The Cardinals, coached by Pat Kelsey, of course, started off the season with a blowout win against Morehead State, then got drilled at home by Tennessee, and then they had some work to do where they won 5 in a row, including wins in Battle for Atlantis over Indiana by 28, and then over West Virginia in overtime, which has proven to be a good win. But they have since lost 3 in a row. They lost the championship game in that one to Oklahoma, 69-64. Then they lost at home to Ole Miss in bad form, 86-63. Another just scenario of the SEC dominating the ACC. Then they did just have Duke, where they got beat at home, 76-65. No really harm in losing any of these 3 games. 3 teams that are all ranked in the AP poll, but Louisville's going to need to pick up a marquee win somewhere. They go to UTEP next, and then they do have Kentucky at Kentucky. That does not sound like fun. So Louisville, they're 5-4 to start the year. They are currently 58th at KenPom and projected to go 11-9 in the conference. KenPom likes them. At 10th, a team I did not think would crack my top 15 in the ACC, but I've been impressed. Florida State. Florida State all the way up there. They're projected to go 10-10 in the conference. Not so bad whatsoever. This looked like a rather dull roster. They're 66th total at KenPom. Their losses, they are 7-3, I should mention. Their losses came to Florida at home against Florida. Florida has just been beaten up on everyone. They lost on the road to LSU, and then they lost on the road to NC State by 10 both games. The NC State game was in overtime. Though I like what I see from this Florida State team, though. Based on resume, this is one of those teams that's probably 12 or 13 in the ACC. I don't know. The ACC's bad. But I have them up at 10 because they got some size. They got Jameer Watkins, one of the best players in the entire conference. And I saw them against that NC State team, and they held their own. They honestly probably should have won the game in that one. I also saw them against LSU. Didn't think they were bad, but they don't really have any wins of note. They did win against Massachusetts on a neutral by 33. UMass is not a bad team, so they also beat Western Carolina pretty bad as well, beat them by 34. So Florida State team, not too bad. They're 66th at KenPom right now. As mentioned, they are projected to go 10-10 in ACC play. Moving down, let's talk about Notre Dame. I have Notre Dame at 11. They're off to a rocky 5-5 start. They start off the year 4-0. They picked up a good win over Georgetown, 84-63 at Georgetown. This was early in the year, and then it just got shaky. They lost a home game to Elon, which you just can't do, 84-77. Then they lost 4 in a row, all 3 in a row in the Players era, and then lost to Georgia. So those losses were they lost to Rutgers by 1. They lost to Houston by 11, which isn't too bad. And then they lost to Creighton by 4. So they're somewhat competitive until they went to Georgia and got blitzed 69-48. But then they did beat Syracuse, but Syracuse looks rather shaky as well. Now, it is worth noting that Marcus Burton was hurt for quite a few of these games. He is supposed to be coming back somewhat soon. So their most important player, their best player, he's been out for a couple games now. They don't look like a tournament team, unfortunately. I thought they were going to be somewhat close this year, but they're still 79th at KenPom, projected to go 10-10 in the conference. But with this non-con 5-5, that's not going to be good enough to 5-4, excuse me, because Syracuse was in conference. They do still have a couple more. They got Dartmouth and Lemoyne, which they should kill, but no real notable wins other than at Georgetown, and we know what Georgetown's been the last couple of years. At number 12, let's talk about Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, the Fighting Damon Stoudemire's. Georgia Tech off to a 4-5 start. So yes, you might think, why do I have them up at 12? So they lost to that blazing hot North Florida team early, which, yeah, that's ugly. That's ugly. They lost at home to Georgia by 8. Then they lost at home to Cincinnati by 23. But they're improving. They're not. They're getting better. They went to Oklahoma and actually put up a fight. Final score ended up 76-61, but it was a fight. Then they went to North Carolina and almost beat them. North Carolina ended up losing 68-65. They are 102nd at KenPom, so not that low. But yeah, they maybe should be a little bit lower than 12th. The resume isn't great. I've just seen this team. They kind of passed the eye test a little bit. Nathan George and Javian McCullum. Javian McCullum should be really good. Who would have thought that Otega Owe was this much better than Javian McCullum? Javian McCullum hasn't been bad, but they're 4-5, so not much there. I like their team, though. Nathan George, Javian McCullum, Bay and Dongo. Yeah, they should probably be a little bit lower than 12, but we'll see. We'll see. They got a neutral site game against Northwestern where they really get a chance to prove themselves. They're currently the underdog by 5 points in that one, but Georgia Tech is projected to go 11th in the ACC, so maybe I'm not too low on them, but they're off to a shaky start. They're projected to go 8-12. All right, 13 Virginia. Virginia 5-4 to start the season. 108th at KenPom, so right in that Georgia Tech range. Now they have that neutral site win over Villanova. That's seeming to age a little bit better than we might have expected. I can't believe Kyle Neptune lost that game. So after they beat Villanova, we're like, all right, this team's got some talent. Then they played a neutral site game against Tennessee, got beat 64-42, can't score again. Then a neutral site game to St. John's. This was in the Baja Mar, both of these games, 82-55. So yes, it is the same Virginia team as last year. They have that win over Villanova though, but then they struggled with Manhattan, who's 307th at KenPom, beat them by 9 at home, and then they beat Holy Cross, and then they went to Florida, got drilled, and then went to SMU and also got drilled. So Coach Ron Sanchez up for a shaky, that's tough coming in a month before the season when the coach just up and retires. They're still projected to go 8-12, but do not look near a tournament team right now. Now, the team I think outside of Wake Forest I've been most disappointed in the ACC is Syracuse. They're off to a 4-4 start. Listen to these first couple games. It's just ugly. They beat Lemoyne, 339th team in the country, by 4. Colgate, who is not the same Colgate as they've been, 272nd ranked by KenPom, 74-72. Both these games at home. Beat Youngstown State at home, 104-95, and 2 overtimes at home, 216th ranked Youngstown State. So we're like, yeah, as soon as they play some real competition, they're going to get beat. And then they kind of put up a fight with Texas, got beat by 4 on a neutral site, and then they got beat by Texas Tech as well on a neutral site. Beat Cornell, get drilled, and I mean drilled, by Tennessee, 96-70, and then lose to Notre Dame to get off to a 4-4 start. Now they got one with Georgetown in 2 games. That's an old rivalry game. That'll be a fun one to watch too. Just programs where it's like, man, what happened? What happened? Year 2 under Coach Autry is not looking great. They're currently 105th, so right around that same range as Georgia Tech and Virginia, and they are currently projected to as well go 8-12 in the conference. At 15, the Miami Hurricanes, Coach Larinaga, we mentioned he might be retiring after this year. It's kind of just what I'm leaning towards, because let's talk about their start to the season. Start off with a blowout win over Fairleigh Dickinson, a blowout win over Binghamton, a blowout win over Coppin State, all teams in the 300s, keep in mind. And then they've lost 6 in a row. They have lost their last 6 games. A neutral site game to Drake, a neutral site game to Oklahoma State, a neutral site game to VCU, a home game to Charles Southern, that's the worst one, a home game to Arkansas, and a home game to Clemson. It is absolutely ugly. They are still ranked 99th at KenPom for some reason. I don't know, probably because they blew out those first couple teams, and along with their preseason numbers were pretty good. Torvik had them like top 20. They're bad. They are bad. They don't even look like they want to be there. Larinaga is got to be just ripping his eyes out right now, and I do not blame him. It's been 2 very frustrating years for him. They're still projected to go 8-12. I think that's generous. I think they go worse than that, and as mentioned, 99th at KenPom. At 16, I have California, coached by Mark Madsen. They're currently 119th at KenPom, so my rankings kind of adding up with the KenPom rankings. They're somewhat close here, and their losses, could be worse, could be much worse. Vanderbilt, proven to be a pretty good team this year. Missouri, at Missouri, they only lost by 5. Not a horrible loss for Cal there. Then they lost at home to Stanford, as we already mentioned. I like Stanford. They did beat USC at USC earlier this year, so they're off to a not so horrible start. I don't see it with this roster whatsoever. Stojakovic is pretty good, but this roster looks rather dull. They're off to a 6-3 start. Need to see them beat a good team. USC is not good this year. They're 93rd at KenPom. So California, 119th at KenPom, and they are currently projected to go 6-14 in the conference. Now at 17, what might be a shock? Boston College. Most people will have them 18th. I have them 17th. I think they're better than Virginia Tech. Their losses have come to VCU by 25. They did beat Boise State. What a random win by Boston College to beat Boise State in the Cayman Islands Classic. 63-61. Boise State's good. Then they lost at home to Dartmouth. Yikes, 322nd ranked team in the country. lost at home to South Carolina by 22, and South Carolina stinks this year. Then they lost at Wake Forest only by 6, put up a little bit of a fight there. I don't hate Earl Grant. I think Earl Grant is fine. It is an impossible place to win. They're 6-3. They're 6-4, 6-4 with a win over Boise State. I kept them above Virginia Tech. They're currently 154th at KenPom and projected to go 5-15 in the conference. Now, Virginia Tech is horrible. Horrible. They have 3 wins. They start off the year 3-0. Delaware State, USC, Upstate, both in the 340s of KenPom. Remember, there's 364 teams. And then at Winthrop, or at home against Winthrop, Winthrop, not too bad, 165th in the country. They produced Chandler Vaudrin playing in the G League. Then they have also lost 6 in a row. They got drilled by Penn State, lost at home to Jacksonville, got drilled by Michigan, got drilled by South Carolina, got drilled at home by Vanderbilt, then lost at home to Pitt by only 5. So they're getting a little bit better, but they are still a very bad basketball team. They're 153rd at KenPom, and they are currently projected to go 6-14, so 1 game ahead of Boston College. I think Virginia Tech is the worst team in the Power 5 conference, quite frankly. They've got a lot of issues going on over there as of right now. Moving on, let's talk about the Big 12. We're done with the ACC. That is all the ACC. Let's talk about the Big 12. At number 1, I have Iowa State. Iowa State off to a 7-1 start, currently up to 3 in the AP poll this year. Their lone loss on that neutral floor game to Auburn, where they led by 18 in that game, but ended up losing. They have key wins over Dayton, Colorado, Marquette at home. They have a great resume. Iowa State is fantastic. There's not much to really talk to them about because we talk about them all the time because they are spectacular. Keyshawn Gilbert, Tamin Lipsey, Milan Mochilovic, Josh Jefferson, Curtis Jones. This team is really good. They are a true national title contender. I think they're the best team in the Big 12. I think they've kind of actually separated themselves this year as the team to beat in the Big 12. At number 2, I kept Houston. Now, Houston is still favored over Iowa State in terms of their projections at KenPom. They're 5th at KenPom. Should have mentioned Iowa State 6th at KenPom, projected to go 15-5. Houston 5th, also projected to go 15-5, but they're 5-3 to start the year. Remember, they lost that game to Auburn early in the season. They also lost on that neutral floor game to Alabama. Then they lost to San Diego State. Now, the Alabama and San Diego State game were both in overtime in the Players Era Festival. Now, they're going to be loved by the computers because their defense is spectacular. It is so good. They held Notre Dame to 54 points. They held Butler to 51 points in blowout wins in both of those. So they're still loved by the computers. They were number 1 in the first in most computer algorithms, but to start the season, and they've fallen a little bit, but they could easily, you could look up and they could be 7-1 as of now. So I still kept them at number 2. I give them the slight edge above Kansas as of right now, but I do have Kansas at number 3, off to a 7-2 start. The preseason number 1 won their first 7 games and picked up some good wins en route. They took down Duke, which is huge. They took down Michigan State on a neutral, which is aging beautifully. Then they did beat North Carolina at home, which isn't aging as well. But their last 2 games, 2 tough road games to go to. Creighton, no one wins at Creighton. They got beat 76-63, and then they just lost that rivalry game at Missouri 76-67. We've talked a lot. I mean, obviously it's a blue blood, one of the biggest brands in the sport. We've talked a lot about Kansas this year. We were really worried about the Alabamas of the world coming into the year because they have so much talent, and it's like, how do you figure out this rotation? We didn't really see it with Kansas because they really seemed like they would all fit together, but it's actually kind of been opposite. The Alabama rotation is kind of working, and the Kansas one just is not. They have too many pieces, not enough star guards. It looks like new pieces came in to DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, and Hunter Dickinson's team, and that's what's happening. They're losing games. They shouldn't be losing games. They're really talented. Hunter Dickinson, he's still doing Hunter Dickinson things as mentioned, but Kansas is down to 11th total at KenPom, and they're currently projected to go 13-7, good for 3rd place in the Big 12. At 4, I got Cincinnati jumping up to 4. Now, what I will say about Cincinnati, and I'm fine with anyone who has them, quite frankly, at about number 9, is they haven't beat anyone. They haven't beat anyone, but they are drilling the teams that they should be drilling. Their only really real game was at Villanova, and they got beat. They're 7-1 to start the year. They got beat at Villanova. Now, I think Villanova's got a ton of talent, so it's like, kind of just throw that game away and see what happens. They did win an away game at Northern Kentucky and also an away game at Georgia Tech. Not great, but I'm still bought in on this Cincinnati team. They've also been playing without one of their better players, Dan Skillings. I like this team. I got them up to 4, just quite frankly, because the Big 12's eating itself up. They're third. They're the third best conference as of right now, according to KenPom. We'll talk about those stats here in a little bit, but I got them at 4. They're currently 16th at KenPom and also projected to go 13-7. At 5, I have Baylor. Baylor off to a 5-3 start. Remember, they got drilled that opening night game against Gonzaga, then rebounded with a good win over Arkansas. They also had that huge double overtime win against St. John's in the Baja Mar, thanks to a Jeremy Roach buzzer beater. Then they got drilled by Tennessee in the championship game of that one, and then they just lost at UConn 76-72, but put up a good fight. They're starting to really figure things out. If you watch Baylor, Rob Wright has their freshman who isn't supposed to be their star freshman. It's supposed to be VJ Edgecombe. Rob Wright has been better. They've thrown him into the lineup a little bit more here, and they look a lot better with him in there. I'm still a little bit bought in on this Baylor team. I think Scott Drew will figure it out. They're 23rd at KenPom total. Not too bad. They're currently projected to go 12-8 in the conference. At number 6, something I never thought I would say, and I might be overrating them a little bit. Tell me if I am. Arizona State. They're 8-1, and every time I watch their team, I'm impressed. Every game I've watched, they have been nothing but impressive. They're 8-1. Their one loss is at Gonzaga, and they led most of that game. You should not be leading at Gonzaga, especially with their preseason ranking coming in. They beat Santa Clara earlier in the year, which Santa Clara was supposed to be one of the mid-major darlings. They beat Grand Canyon kind of bad on a neutral floor. They beat St. Thomas, who I think is really underrated. They're 133rd. They beat Cal Poly by 4. Cal Poly sneakily one of those teams that you don't want to schedule in the non-con. They also beat New Mexico on a neutral. They beat St. Mary's on a neutral, and they beat San Diego badly at home in their most recent game. They've done nothing but impress. Anyone who has them like 9th to 10th, that's fine. But resume-based, they look pretty good. They're 50th at KenPom, so they're not going to be treated as well in terms of the computer metrics. They're projected to go 9-11 in the conference. So yes, it might be strange having them up at number 6. They've done nothing but be great. Jaden Quaintance has been fantastic. Their defense is good. They got shot makers. Adam Miller's good. I got Arizona State up at number 6. They've beat someone. You know who hasn't beat anyone yet? It's Texas Tech. Now, I was so bought in on Texas Tech coming into the year. They, quite frankly, haven't beat anyone. They've played 2 tough games. St. Joe's on a neutral and lost that one. Then Texas A&M on a neutral, and they also lost that one. Now, take the Texas A&M one with a grain of salt. They were without their best player, JT Toppin. But you got to win. You got to win some of these games. Now, this is going to be one of those teams where it's the sign of a weak non-conference schedule where they really they would have to win the Big 12 to be probably a top 2 seed in March. Now you're probably looking at a 5-6 seed, even if they go above 500 in Big 12, just because they haven't beat anyone. Their notable wins are at DePaul, and we know what DePaul's been, and a neutral site game against Syracuse, and Syracuse has been horrible. So they're going to have they got some work to do in conference play. Their roster seems to be like one of my favorite rosters in the entire country. They fit together so well. Got a pass-first point guard, JT Toppin. You got the pass-first point guard is Elijah Hawkins. They have a stud in JT Toppin, and they got some other pieces around him, Chase McMillian, and Darian Williams. I like this team. But got to see them win. Got to put up some results. At number 8, I have West Virginia, coached by Darian DeVries this year, bringing over his son Tucker. Now, their huge wins, Gonzaga in overtime, that's massive in the Bahamas. Same goes for Arizona, win over Arizona. Hopefully that ages well for West Virginia's sake on a neutral, both in overtime. Now, they did lose to Louisville in the middle of that, also in overtime, a lot of overtime games. They drilled Georgetown, and their other loss is at Pitt. Remember, we talked about that game earlier in the year. They lost by 24. But West Virginia is 56th at KenPom, so you're talking somewhere around bubble-ish right now. I think they would be in as of right now. KenPom wouldn't have them in, but in terms of their resume, a win over Gonzaga, that's about as good as you can do. They're currently projected to go 9-11 in the conference, though. So the Big 12, rule of note with the Big 12, you want to go about 9-11, 10-10 or better, and you're pretty much in, depending on what you did, just because it's just a gauntlet. We're going to talk about the same thing with the SEC. The SEC, man, it's absolutely incredible this year. At number 9, Arizona. Arizona off to a 4-4 start. They also look like they just don't want to be there anymore. It's been ugly. No notable wins this year to start the year. They lost at Wisconsin. They lost at home to Duke. They lost at Wisconsin by 15, lost at home to Duke by 14, lost a neutral site game to Oklahoma by 5, lost a neutral site game to West Virginia by 7 in overtime. They haven't beat anyone. They get UCLA next. They have to win that game or it is sirens going off for Arizona. They're still 28th at KenPom because of the preseason ranking. Projected to go 11-9 in their first season in the Big 12. We'll see. It's not looking great. Next up at number 10, BYU 6-2 to start the season. BYU is coached by Kevin Young this year. They are 47th at KenPom. We don't know too much about BYU yet. Now, they lost on a neutral site game to Ole Miss. Very good game. They lost at Providence by 19, and then they have beat NC State. That's really it. So it's kind of like some of the middle of the pack, higher major teams, other than Ole Miss is great this year. But we don't really know too much about BYU. But we'll see. We'll see once Big 12 play comes on. They're currently projected to go 10-10. So right in the middle there. At number 11, I have Colorado. Colorado off to a 7-2 start this year. Losses coming to Michigan State and Iowa State in the Maui Invitational. Excuse me. Remember, they beat UConn. That's the big one. They beat UConn in the Maui. They also just beat Colorado State at home in a rivalry game. They're currently 77th at KenPom and projected to go only 7-13. Yes, rough roster, rough preseason start. 7-13. That's not going to get you in. We'll see. UCF I have next at number 12. Now, some people might put them higher because remember they beat Texas A&M right away to start the year. Then they beat Florida Atlantic also on a home floor. Since then, they have struggled a little bit. They lost a neutral site game to Wisconsin badly by 16. They lost a neutral site game to LSU by 7 in triple overtime. That was a fun game. Then since then, they just haven't really played anyone. Beat Milwaukee, 162nd, kind of struggled with them at home. So it's kind of hit or miss. It's kind of like this year, most people either love UCF, they're like, yeah, they got some talent, or they can't stand them. They're like, man, they've got some characters on that team. I'm sort of right in the middle, right at 12th. That's sort of somewhat on the bubble, but they're currently 84th at KenPom, projected to go 7-13. At 13th, Kansas State. Boy, do I have some mean things to say about Kansas State. Kansas State off to a 6-3 start. Their losses came at home to LSU, neutral site game to Liberty, and away at St. John's where they led by 4 and got beat by 17. Coleman Hawkins came in. I've said enough mean things about Coleman Hawkins. He came in, got $2 million, and the team got significantly worse as soon as he came in. I'm not going to dive too deep into Kansas State. They're 71st at KenPom right now, currently projected to go 7-13 with one of the highest NIL budgets. Do not like this team whatsoever this year. At 14, I do have Oklahoma State. Most people you talk to will have Oklahoma State at 16. I have them at 14 because of Steve Lutz. I still kind of trust Steve Lutz in this scenario. They got off to a 3-0 start, then lost neutral floor games to Florida Atlantic and Nevada. They have beaten Miami, which, be it as it may, it's still a big brand. It's Miami. And then they just went to Seton Hall and beat Seton Hall. Now, Seton Hall is not good this year, but I still trust in Steve Lutz. I think this team's going to get better. They kind of pass the eye test. They're athletic, but Oklahoma State always passes the eye test. They're athletic. They're fast. They just haven't won games lately. They get a good one on a neutral floor against Oklahoma next on Saturday, so that'll be a fun one to keep up on. They're 85th at KenPom, currently projected to finish last and go 6-14 at KenPom. Now, the teams I have behind them, I do have Utah. Now, Utah is actually projected to go 8-12 via KenPom, which is like 11th or so, 64th in total at KenPom. I think this team stinks. They haven't beaten anyone, quite frankly. They've beaten no team better than 253rd in the country. They played a semi-away game at Mississippi State, only lost by 5, and then they lost at home to St. Mary's by 9, but that was not a 9-point game. It was a blowout the entire way. I think Utah stinks. I don't like the roster. I think Craig Smith is really overrated as a coach, quite frankly. I think Utah finishes towards the bottom of the Big 12 for sure in their this upcoming year. Now last, Not something I thought I'd ever say. I have TCU dead last in the Big 12 as of right now. They're off to a 5-4 start. This team is not good. They don't have any offensive firepower. The defense is okay at best. You can say they're 42nd in defense right now, 158th in offense. That's horrible for a Big 12 team. They have they beat Xavier. Excuse me. They did beat Xavier at home. I forgot about that one. 76-72, but their losses, they came away at Michigan. That's fine. Neutral site game to Santa Clara. Santa Clara is below 500. That's not good. A neutral floor game to Colorado State. Colorado State is not good this year. And a semi-home game to Vanderbilt the other day. They're bad. I think they're the worst team in the Big 12 this year. They just don't have it this year. No scoring whatsoever. I think it's going to be a bloodbath between TCU, Utah, and Oklahoma State battling for last place in the Big 12. They are 91st at KenPom and projected to go 7-13. That's the Big 12. I know we're doing a lot of talking here. It's going to be a longer podcast, don't get me wrong. Let's dive into the Big East, where we have only 11 teams to discuss, starting with number one. This was one of the conferences where you could just label them out one by one, and it was very easy to do. I think these are kind of in order of just about how 95% of the people in the country would have it. Marquette at number one. They've without a doubt been the best team in the Big East right now. They're currently 9th total at KenPom. Their only loss is an away game at Iowa State, and they have some great wins already. They went to Maryland and beat them, won at home to Purdue, won a neutral floor game against Georgia, and just won at home against Wisconsin. One of the best resumes in the country. They're fighting for a 1 seed. They're spectacular. They got a top 3 player in the entire country in Cam Jones. As mentioned, they are 9th. They're great offensively. They're great defensively. They're projected to go 15-5 in the Big East. At number 2, it is still the UConn Huskies. UConn off to a 7-3 start. A little bit shaky of a start. Don't get me wrong, they start off 4-0 by playing absolutely nobody, but then they went 0-3 in Maui, as famously happened. Lost to Memphis, Colorado, Dayton on neutral floors. Then the last 2 games, they won a home game against Baylor and then went to Texas and dismantled them. So they're getting back. They're getting better. I still have them at number 2 in the Big East. Kind of struggled a little bit real early to start this year, and now they've kind of redeemed themselves. And it all just by their leader, UConn. Beating Baylor, beating Texas. Good wins there. They're still 13th at KenPom and projected to go 14-6 in the conference. At third, St. John's, the Johnnies, led by Rick Pitino, got off to a, could have been a better start. They beat New Mexico, beat Rick's son Richard. Then they lost that heartbreaker to Baylor. If they beat Baylor in that game, we're talking about St. John's as like this might be a top 10 team. They lose that game, unfortunately, and now I don't remember if they're ranked in this week's AP poll. They weren't ranked in last week's AP poll. They lose that game, then you beat Virginia. Everyone beats Virginia anymore. Then you lose a neutral floor game to Georgia. So they're 7-2. They beat Kansas State, as mentioned, at home. Doesn't mean anything. They stink. But they're still 71st in KenPom, so it's a somewhat notable win. Them in New Mexico. They just really haven't beaten anyone fantastic yet. That Baylor one would have carried a lot of weight, but Jeremy Roach had something to say about it. St. John's still 15th at KenPom, so they're highly thought of by the computers. Currently projected to go 14-6 and be tied for second with UConn in that one. At 4, Creighton. Now, I feel bad for Creighton fans right now because, they have dealt with something all year long. Stephen Ashworth rolls his ankle. Ryan Kalkbrenner was hurt. And then now Pop Isaacs has a hip injury, and it looks like he is going to be out, if not the entire season, maybe just most of the season if they make a deep run. Feel bad for Creighton fans. They got off to a 4-0 start, then lost 3 in a row. They lost that home game to Nebraska, neutral floor games to San Diego State badly, and then to Texas A&M on a neutral floor in the Players era. Then they did beat Notre Dame, and then they had that massive home win against Kansas where Pop Isaacs went off, and then he got hurt. You feel bad for him. Feel bad for Creighton fans, and then they did just beat UNLV at home as well. So they're 7-3 to start the year. They're 41st at KenPom. They're falling down. A lot of it is injuries, but they're still projected to go 11-9 in the Big East. Will that be good enough? I think so. That would put them at 18-12 in the Big East, or total in the Big East Conference, though. Oh man, I don't know. That's close. I would go 12-8 if I were Creighton. I would hope so. At 5th, I do have Xavier. Now, some people might put Villanova over Xavier. I'm still going to go with Xavier right now. They won their first 6 games. They beat Wake Forest at home, which seemed like it was going to be a good win. It is aging roughly. Then they lost a neutral floor game to Michigan, which was the rough one for this season, losing 78-53. Then they barely beat South Carolina State at home, and then they went and lost at TCU. They seem to be getting a little bit worse, but this team has all the talent in the world. I think they're going to be just fine. They get to play Cincinnati in the crosstown shootout here on Saturday, so they get a chance to pick up that huge win and prove that they are still a force to be reckoned with in the Big East. I like their roster. Off to a little bit of a shaky start. They're currently 65th at KenPom. That's not good enough. Projected to go 9-11 in the conference. That would not be good enough. You definitely have to go over 500 in the Big East if you want a chance of getting an at-large bid. At number 6, I do have Villanova. Villanova. If you're a bettor out there and you ever think of betting a Villanova game, do not do it. I can't figure out if this team is I think that Eric Dixon is one of the he's probably top 5 most important players to his team in all of college basketball. He does absolutely everything for him. So they barely beat Lafayette in their opener, then they lose a home game to Columbia, and everyone's like, all right, just get through the season, get rid of Kyle Neptune. Then you lose at St. Joe's. You lose a neutral site game to Virginia, who's obviously awful this year. You beat Penn. You lose a neutral site game to Maryland. Off to a 3-4 start. Here we go again, Kyle Neptune. Then you beat Cincinnati at home, the 16th team according to KenPom at home, 68-60. They drill Temple by almost 30. This team's got talent. I'm not high on Wooga Poplar. I think he's a good defender. I don't think he's very good offensively. This team will go as far as Eric Dixon can take them. They've got some talent. Jameer Brickus has been solid at point guard, but you know who's coaching him. You know who's at the helm. He's got to get the job done this year if he wants his job. They're still 43rd at KenPom. Not too bad. Projected to go 11-9 in the conference. That would put them at 17-13 overall. That's not going to be good enough. They're going to have to go better than 11-9. I think 13-7, and they got a chance. Let's talk about Butler. I have Butler at number 7. Number 7, Butler. They lost that random home game early in the year to Austin Peay, which is killing them. But then they won a neutral site game against Northwestern and Mississippi State, and then got drilled at Houston. So Butler's still a little bit up in the air for Coach Thad Matta. They're currently 62nd at KenPom and projected to go 9-11 in the Big East. Next up, I have Providence. Providence at 6-4 to start the year. Really no notable wins other than that home win against BYU. Their losses have come to Oklahoma, Davidson, and Indiana in the battle for Atlantis, where they finished dead last, and then they just lost at Rhode Island. They did get Bryce Hopkins back, but this team's not very good. 81st overall at KenPom, projected to go 8-12. Next up at number 9. Now, some people might put Georgetown. I threw DePaul up there. They're 7-1. What can you say? They're 7-1. DePaul and Georgetown are still bad. Don't get me wrong. I mean, hey, maybe we don't know. Maybe they're not. But DePaul, their only loss is at Texas Tech, who's currently 25th at KenPom, but they have beaten, absolutely nobody. Their best team they've beaten is Duquesne, and they're 215th in the country. They beat the 215th, 230th, 244, 325, 350, 346 team in the country. That's no good. We don't know about them yet. With that being said, they are favored at home over Providence in their next game on Tuesday, tomorrow. How about that? DePaul favored. They're currently 7-1, 96th at KenPom. Remember, they were in the 300s last year. Yikes, so they're a lot better, but I got them 9th. Hey, they're projected to go 7-13. To me, that would be a successful season. Now, Georgetown also projected to go 7-13, 90th at KenPom. Remember, they had that home loss to Notre Dame, and they lost at West Virginia. Have not beaten literally anybody inside. No one inside the top 230 in the country. So, Ed Cooley, he's got a chance this week against at Syracuse. We'll see about that one. Then dead last, unfortunately, Shaheen Holloway's Seton Hall squad. Seton Hall, 5-5 to start the year. Losses to Oklahoma State at home. Monmouth, at home. Vanderbilt on a neutral. Hofstra on a neutral. Fordham at home. This team has no money. This team is no good. They are projected to lose every single game. They will be an underdog now. KenPom does not put it that way. They're still projected to go 5-15 because you'll win a game that you're an underdog. I hope. DePaul didn't last year, but I hope. They're 142nd at KenPom right now. They are bad. They're in panic mode as of right now. All right, now let's dive into the Big Ten. Now, the Big Ten is the hardest, and I mean hardest, conference to rank by far. By far. I kept Purdue at number 1. To me, it's Purdue until proven otherwise. We give Dan Hurley a huge jump. We give Kelvin Sampson a huge jump. We should do the same thing with Matt Painter. I've still got him at 1. They are, when you look at KenPom, no one is projected to go better than 13-17 at KenPom. That is absolutely insane. That's how tight the Big Ten is. Purdue is currently the favorite in terms of most betting markets and in terms of they're the highest ranked team in total at KenPom. They're 12th. They're 8-2 to start the year. Their losses came at Marquette and at Penn State. They did just pick up a huge win over Maryland at home. They also have wins over NC State, Alabama, and Mississippi. But they're 12th. They're still led by Matt Painter. They're going to be just fine. They're currently projected to go 12-8, so they're projected to be in 4th in the conference according to KenPom. Even though they are the favorite, it's because they already suffered that loss to Penn State. At number 2, I got Michigan. They're 21st at KenPom right now. 8-1. Dusty May's been incredible. Remember, they suffered that random loss to Wake Forest, but since then they've been fantastic. Wins over TCU, Virginia Tech, Xavier, Wisconsin, and Iowa. They're 21st at KenPom and currently projected to go 13-17 and tie for first. In third, I got Michigan State. Michigan State also projected to tie for first, going 13-7 according to KenPom, 22nd. Overall, their losses were on a neutral to Kansas in the Champions Classic and Memphis. In Maui, they do have wins over Nebraska, North Carolina, and Colorado. So Tom Izzo's squad off to a decent start, 22nd, projected to go 13-7 and tie for first. At fourth, the final team that is projected to finish tied for first according to KenPom, UCLA Bruins, led by Mick Cronin. They are currently 14th overall at KenPom. Their lone loss on a neutral to New Mexico, which is aging worse and worse, but UCLA just picked up one of the marquee wins of the entire season with a road win at Oregon. A huge win there. They also have a home win against Washington, but Washington not very good this year. Next up, Maryland, the final team that is projected to go 13-7 according to KenPom. Maryland, kind of one of those teams where I don't know about them. I don't know if they have all the talent in the world, if they're top 15 or if they're only like top 30. I'm leaning towards more of top 30 right now. They have that loss at home to Marquette, which is kind of what was eye-opening to me. I saw some things that I saw last year with Kevin Willard and with this Maryland squad that should have been a lot better. They did pick up a neutral site win over Villanova by 1. But the main game that really opened some people's eyes was that home win over Ohio State, where they led 50-17 at the half, ended up winning 83-59. Then they did have an away loss at Purdue, 83-78. So they are 8-2 to start the year, also projected to go 13-7 in the conference. Next up, the Fighting Illini, Illinois. Illinois off to a 6-2 start with losses on a semi-away game to Alabama, and then that away game the other day at Northwestern, which we already talked about. They do have a win over Arkansas. That is just about it, though. They're currently 17th and projected to go 12-8. At 7, I have Oregon. Oregon at number 7. They are currently 9-1 and 12th in the AP poll. They have a win over USC, over Alabama, over San Diego State, over Texas A&M, and Oregon State. Great resume. They won the first ever Players Era Festival. Now they just suffered their first loss at home to UCLA, but they have been spectacular. Nate Biddle has been great. Jackson Shellstad, one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the entire country. They're currently 20th at KenPom and projected to go 12-8. Now at 8th, I have Penn State. Penn State currently 8-1 on the season, off to a great start. One of the best defensive teams in the entire country. Have one of the best defensive players in the entire country, I'll say, with Ace Baldwin. Their lone loss came on a neutral floor game to Clemson. As we noted, they have that win over Purdue. They also beat Virginia Tech, but that's about it. So that home win against Purdue really kind of opened some eyes, but that's kind of really their only win as of right now. Still need to see a little bit more from them, but they've been great to start the year. Don't get me wrong. They're in position for an at-large berth. They're 33rd at KenPom, projected to go 12-8. Nice. Good stuff for Penn State in that one. Next up, the Wisconsin Badgers, who always start off hot. They're 8-2 to start the year. Start off the year 8-0. Then recently suffered losses at home to Michigan and then at Marquette. They do have that huge win over Arizona, along with a neutral site win over Pitt. They're currently 37th at KenPom and projected to go 10-10 and even 10-10 in the Big 12 this year. Big 10, excuse me. All right, now at number 10, the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana off to a shaky start to the year. They are 7-2, so be it as it may, they're 7-2, but they haven't beaten anyone other than Providence on that neutral site game in the last place game of the Battle for Atlantis. That's their only real notable win as of now, and it's Providence. They're 81st in the country. Their losses came both in the Battle for Atlantis, that blowout loss to Louisville, and that blowout loss to Gonzaga as well. So Indiana, they might not have an at-large resume as of right now. Their computer numbers are good enough that it might get them in there. They're 44th currently at KenPom, and they're projected to go 9-11 in the Big Ten. So if that were to happen, Mike Woodson, it's been nice to knowing you. At 11th, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes off to a 6-3 start this season. They opened the season with an eye-opening win over Texas, but since then have been a little bit shaky. Losses at Texas A&M. They have that home loss to Pitt. Then remember they got dismantled at Maryland. They did just recently pick up a home win over Rutgers, which was big. They beat them by 14. The computers love Ohio State. They're 29th at KenPom and projected to go 11-9 in the conference. I still have them down as a bottom half team as of now. At number 12, the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa's off to a 7-2 start. Notable wins, not really any. Northwestern at home by 1 on a buzzer beater. They beat Washington State in a semi-home game. The losses came on a neutral floor to Utah State and at Michigan, where they almost got victory, only lost by 2 at Michigan. So this team's got some talent. I still put them as the best of the rest. The top 11, you could put it in just about any order. In terms of the bottom, I think they're the best of the rest. Some people might say Nebraska, but I'd give it to Iowa as of right now. They're currently 46th at KenPom and projected to go 10-10. Next up, I do have Nebraska at 13th, 6-2 to start the year. They have that huge win at Creighton, which was kind of random. That's their only real good win. They have a away loss at Michigan State, which we just talked about, got beat by 37. Yikes. And then they have a neutral floor loss to St. Mary's. They lost by 3, but the game was not that close. So Nebraska, they're 61st at KenPom. They're not in the tournament conversation as of right now. Now it's still super early, but they're projected to go 8-12 in the Big Ten. They got some work to do. At 14th, one of the other disappointing teams this entire season. So far, I know they're young. It's Rutgers. They're 5-4, have no notable wins except for a win over Notre Dame, which is, kind of notable. They lost at Kennesaw State. They lost on a neutral floor to Alabama and A&M in the Players Era Festival. And then they just lost at Ohio State since then. So they haven't really done anything. With that being said, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are awesome. The rest of the team isn't that bad, but they're just not winning games. They can't put it together right now. 5-4, I got them 14th. They are currently projected to go 7-13 at KenPom. They're 74th overall right now. At 15, Northwestern feels a little low. Could move them up a little bit, but the Big Ten is so close. They're projected to go 9-11. They're 59th at KenPom. So maybe a little higher. Their losses have come to Dayton, Butler, and Iowa. We mentioned they just beat Illinois at home in a good one there. Chris Collins is a winner. I'll give it to him. But I still think they're a bottom half team as of right now. At 16th, USC. USC, what is going on with USC and Eric Musselman? I got them 16th as the third worst team in the entire Big Ten. They're currently 6-4. Their losses, the eye-opening one was against St. Mary's, 71-36. How do you score 36 points in a basketball game? Cam Jones would score more than that himself. 71-36, and then they lost a neutral floor game to New Mexico, 83-73, then lost at home to Oregon by 8, and then they did just beat up on Washington, though, so I don't know. I don't know what to say about USC. I don't think they're very good. I I don't know. It's a work in progress. They're currently 93rd at KenPom right now, and projected to go 6-14 in the conference and finish third for last. So that adds up. In 17th, I have Washington. Now, it's either Washington or Minnesota. I give it to Washington because I think they got a better coach. I think Danny Sprinkle is better. Both teams are not very good. Now, Washington did beat Yale at home by 3, so that's about it. They did lose at home to North Texas. They lost neutral floor games to Wichita State, Wake Forest, and then they got beat by Michigan State at home. I'm sorry, this is Minnesota. I'm talking about. I don't know why I did Minnesota before Washington, but Minnesota. They're currently 6-4. These are their losses. Now let's move up one. Sorry to go out of order. I know it's been a long podcast. Washington 6-3 to start the year. Their losses were against Nevada, UCLA, and USC. You can't lose to USC by 24 if they're going to be one of the worst teams. They do have wins over Santa Clara and Colorado State, so they do have a better resume than Minnesota, but neither team good. Both teams projected to go 5-15 in the Big Ten. That'll do it for the Big Ten. Now, the last one we'll talk about. We're almost done. I promise we'll talk about the SEC, the best conference in college basketball. Did you think you would ever say that? It is. It is by far the SEC as well. The top 5, you could put them in any order. It's coin flip. They're all fantastic. 5 of the top 7 teams in the country, maybe. Top 8 at worst. Auburn, I do have at number 1. I think they got the best resume in the country. They've impressed me the most out of anyone. If you want to put anyone else there, perfectly fine. They have that huge win over Houston. They beat Iowa State, beat North Carolina, beat Memphis, all in Maui, and then they just lost at Duke. They're fantastic. They got the best player in the country as of right now in Jonai Broome. They have the best offense in the country, number 1 rated offense in the country. Number 1 overall in general at KenPom is the Auburn Tigers. They're projected to go 14-4. Number 2 overall, and also number 2 in the SEC, both at KenPom, and according to me, the Tennessee Volunteers, they're 8-0, one of the remaining undefeated teams. Now, they don't really have as good of a resume, if you ask me, as Auburn. They do have good wins. They beat Louisville at Louisville. They beat Virginia. That doesn't really mean much. They beat Baylor and then Syracuse. They don't have as good of wins. They also have one less loss. So if you want to put them as number 1, fully understand it. They are fantastic. Their defense is number 2 in the country. Their offense is top 10 as well. They're awesome. They're currently projected to go 13-5 in the SEC. At number 3, I have Kentucky. Yes, I do have Kentucky. Most people, I think, would put Alabama ahead of Kentucky. I think you got to give them some credit for the resume right now. Now, to me, Alabama's much more talented, but Kentucky might have the best coach in the entire country, and they are cohesive as of right now. I fear that a cool down is coming, but hey, you never know. Mark Pope offenses don't seem to cool down, so that's kind of what we thought about BYU last year. Remember, BYU was ranked number 1 in the first net last year. They did cool down, I guess you can say, but still, I mean, it's BYU. You can't expect that much. With Kentucky, you can. So we'll see going forward, but I gave them the 3 spot as of right now. They're 8-1. 2 neutral site wins over Duke and Gonzaga. That's as good as it gets. The lone loss was this week at home to Clemson, but 2 of the best wins of the entire season for any team. So I put Kentucky up at number 3. At number 4, I do have Alabama at 7-2. Their losses came at Purdue and a neutral floor game against Oregon. They're huge. They have a lot of big wins, though, already. I mean, their strength of schedule is first, by the way, as of right now. It's they have wins over Arkansas State, who we just saw beat Memphis. They have win over McNeese, Illinois, Houston, Rutgers, North Carolina. That is ridiculous. Nate Oates, please keep scheduling games like this. It's fantastic. They're currently 7th overall at KenPom and projected to go 11-7. I think I forgot to mention Kentucky. They're 10th overall at KenPom, also projected to go 11-7. The third team projected to go 11-7 in the SEC and currently 8th overall at KenPom is the Florida Gators. They are also undefeated, off to a 9-0 start. Haven't really beaten anyone too much of note. They beat Florida State, Wake Forest, Wichita State, Virginia. All teams kind of hovering, they're all in between 66 and 109th in the country. So, hey, when you click on their name at KenPom, it comes up nation's longest active winning streak. So good for Todd Golden. If Todd Golden, we're not going to dive into that right now. They currently have the 5th best offense in the country According to KenPom, they're off to a great start this year. At 6, I do have Ole Miss. Ole Miss, I think, is kind of flying under the radar right now. Their lone loss was on a neutral floor to Purdue, where they got beat on a Miles Colvin buzzer beater. So they could be up there. They beat Louisville badly. They beat BYU. They beat Colorado State, which is okay, but they're kind of flying under the radar. Chris Beard continues to be one of the most underrated coaches in the country. 13th best offense, 27th overall. At KenPom, they're currently projected to only go 9-9 though. But the rest of these teams, we're not going to say one that's projected to go over 500. At 7, I have Texas A&M, also projected to go 9-9. They're currently 24th. At KenPom, they suffered that opening night loss at UCF, lost neutral floor game to Oregon. They do have big wins recently, though. They beat Ohio State in between those two, and then after the loss to Oregon, beat Creighton, beat Rutgers, beat Wake Forest, beat Texas Tech. Pretty good stuff. Texas A&M flying up there. They got a great defense, 11th ranked defense in the country. They turn the ball over so much. As mentioned, it is so tough to watch them play basketball. They turn it over, they force up shots, but they are fantastic on defense and fantastic at rebounding. Number 1 ranked offensive rebounding team in the entire country. They're 8-2 to start the year, projected to go 9-9, 24th overall in the country. At number 8, I have Mississippi State, also projected to go 9-9, 26th. At KenPom, they're 8-1 to start the year. Lone loss coming on a neutral floor to Butler. They have that huge win over Pitt. They also beat Utah, SMU, and UNLV. They got a guy by the name of Josh Hubbard that everyone should know, led by Chris Jans. They're projected to go 9-9 once again. At number 9, I have Oklahoma. Oklahoma is ranked right now. Good for them. Love to see that. They're one of the last unbeaten teams, 9-0 to start the year. They have wins over Providence, Arizona, Louisville. They deserve to be ranked. They have pretty good wins. All of those were in the battle for Atlantis, led by Porter Moser. They're currently 42nd in the country. Even off to a 9-0 start, they're projected to only go 8-10 in the SEC. At number 10, Georgia. Georgia off to a sneaky good start. They are 8-1 to start the year with their lone loss coming on a neutral floor to Marquette. They also beat St. John's. They beat Notre Dame. They beat North Florida, who's been upsetting everyone. They're 8-1. Need to see some bigger wins outside of St. John's. That's a great win. That's a great win. We'll see how this team does. This is one of the teams I'm most intrigued by heading into SEC play. They're currently 35th at KenPom. They look like a tournament team right now, also projected to go 8-10. At 11, Vanderbilt. Did not think I would ever say Vanderbilt up at 11 in the SEC. Just shows what Coach Mark Byington has done. Their lone loss on a neutral floor to Drake. They have wins over TCU, Virginia Tech, Seton Hall, Nevada, Cal. Not the best teams, but you think you would fall one of those games. They haven't. They are winning as of right now. They have a great offense, 38th in the country, which is really high for a team like Vanderbilt. They're looking good. The numbers do not like them as much. They're currently 60th at KenPom, projected to go 6-12 in the SEC and finish second to last. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Mark Byington's a good enough coach that he will get them at least third to last. He'll be a little better than that. At number 12, Missouri. Missouri just knocked off Kansas. Missouri's off to an 8-1 start. Yes, just if you're watching on YouTube, look at those graphics. That's ridiculous how good the SEC is this year. Outside of South Carolina, there's no teams with more than 2 losses. Man, this team, this conference is good. Their lone loss came at Memphis. They only lost by 8. They have wins over Cal, we mentioned, and they did just beat Kansas, which is absolutely huge. At home, they're currently 49th at KenPom and projected to go 7-11. Next up at 13, you will notice we have not said Arkansas yet. Yes, I have Arkansas down here. They're 7-2. They haven't beaten anyone. They have beaten absolutely no one. They have had 2 notable games this year. Neutral floor game against Baylor, they lost only by 5. Neutral floor game against Illinois on Thanksgiving, lost by 13. They haven't beaten anyone. They don't deserve to be above 13th. They have a chance coming up on Tuesday against Michigan. We'll talk about that here in a second. But led by John Calipari, it's been a disappointing start. As of right now, I know Kentucky fans are just loving it. I don't. I like Arkansas fans. I hope Arkansas can get the job done. I would love to see a competitive Kentucky-Arkansas game. As of right now, when Arkansas travels to Kentucky, they would probably be favored by 10, 15 points. It's looking ugly as of right now. They're 45th at KenPom and currently projected to go 8-10 in the SEC. Next up, Texas. Texas also off to a 7-2 start. They have that neutral site loss to Ohio State, and then just recently, that loss to UConn at home, and in between, they have won every game. NC State, St. Joe's, Syracuse, their only really notable wins. No team better than 70th in the country. As mentioned, there's going to be a long talk about Rodney Terry's future at Texas if this keeps up. They're currently 38th at KenPom and projected to go 8-10. Next up, LSU. LSU off to a sneaky good start this year. Now they got some bad news. Their stud Jalen Reed is out for what seems like, I think it's the season. I think he tore his Achilles, so that kind of stinks. They're off to an 8-1 start. I kind of saw this team sneaking up and like getting somewhere close to, like, right now they'd be on the bubble. They have wins over Florida State, UCF, Kansas State. Their lone loss is against Pitt on a neutral floor. Not a bad loss. They're 8-1. I like Coach Matt McMahon. I think he's done a decent job. 8-1. I thought they had a real chance of kind of, but that's a tough one, losing Jalen Reed. That as soon as I saw it, I'm like, man, that stinks. They're 51st at KenPom, projected to go 7-11. And the anonymous last place team in the SEC, unfortunately, is South Carolina this year. They're 6-3, worst record, worst ranked at KenPom. They lost opening night at home to North Florida. They also lost at Indiana. They lost a neutral floor game to Xavier. They have beaten Virginia Tech and Boston College because, quite frankly, the SEC is just so much better than the ACC this year. They beat who I had as ACC's worst team, Virginia Tech. They beat them on a neutral by 10, and they went to Boston College and beat Boston College by 23. Just kind of shows the difference of the SEC and the ACC this year. As mentioned, they're 68th at KenPom, projected to go 5-13 and finish last. All right, that is the entire Power 5 team breakdown right there, going through it all. Now, we've been talking about all these conferences, so I thought it would be cool to just pull it up. This will only take a second to just talk about what the KenPom conference rankings as of right now. So as of right now, it is the SEC up top by a long shot. Then there is a big gap between them and the Big Ten at number 2. Yes, I saw this and I'm like, the Big Ten over the Big 12. And then I did the power rankings and I'm like, you know what? I think that's right. The Big 12 has underperformed so far this year. So the Big 10 is number 2, Big 12 number 3, Big East number 4, ACC number 5. Then there is a huge drop-off. So, yes, we talk bad about the ACC quite a bit, and there is a big gap between the Big 12 and the Big East, and then even bigger between the Big East and the ACC, but they're still loads above the rest. And then it's the Mountain West, the West Coast Conference, the A10. Conference USA, talk to me. And then number 10 is the AAC. All right, so as promised, just real quickly, we'll talk about the Week 6 AP poll, because every national champion over the past 20 years has been in the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. So these are, if history repeats itself, these are the only teams that have a chance of winning the NCAA tournament. Tennessee, Auburn, Iowa State, Duke, Kentucky, Marquette, Alabama, Gonzaga, Florida, Kansas, Purdue, Oregon. Those are your only teams. It's been 20 years, so that is, at some point, it's not just a coincidence, right? So Week 6, teams are really starting to figure themselves out, really getting an identity. These are your teams, and quite frankly, I don't see a world where Oregon wins the NCAA tournament this year. And God love Purdue, but without Zach Edey, I think it's just too much. I don't think this is the year that Purdue will do it. So look at those top 10. Look at those top 10 right now if you're thinking of placing any bets, something like that. All right, now we'll quickly, there's not much at all, talk about the games to watch for this upcoming week.
Games to watch.
All right, starting on Tuesday, there is nothing to watch on Monday. Let's talk about some Big Ten action. Starting at 7 o'clock on Peacock, we got Penn State traveling to Rutgers. Penn State favored by 2 in that game. Also at 7 o'clock, or at 8:30, excuse me. Where did I get 7 o'clock? At 8:30, we get Providence traveling to DePaul. We talked about this. DePaul is favored by 1. Give them some love. DePaul favored by 1 over Providence. Got to tune into that one. At 9 o'clock, number 11, Wisconsin. Well, these are old rankings, excuse me. So I know the graphic up on YouTube has these rankings. Don't look at them. I made this the other day, or I made this earlier this morning before the rankings came out. So currently Wisconsin traveling to Illinois. Illinois favored by 6 in that one. And at 9 o'clock, Arkansas takes on Michigan. Michigan favored by 4 in that one. That'll be a fun one. John Calipari versus Dusty May, 2 first-year coaches with really high expectations. Nothing really good on Wednesday either, unfortunately. So let's go over to Thursday. Thursday, we have a rivalry game. Iowa State, now the number 3 ranked team in the country, travels to Iowa. Iowa State favored by 5 in this one. This game's at 7:30 on Fox Sports 1. And then on Friday, December 13th, Indiana travels to Nebraska. Nebraska is favored by 1. As of right now, there will be fireworks if Nebraska wins this game and Mike Woodson loses yet another game. He needs to pick up some key wins. They did nothing in the non-conference. If they don't get in this year, there's going to be fireworks. Indiana fans are as proud as they come, as they should be. One of the greatest, if not the greatest program. I mean, that's where basketball is. They need to win that game. Let's just say that. All right, that was a long podcast. Thanks to those who stuck with us. Hopefully this provided a little bit of insight, some cool KenPom numbers. We're going to really start diving into these computers. We're going to get super nerdy. In fact, 2 weeks from today, yes, 2 weeks from today, first bracketology release. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to like and subscribe so you're not out of the loop. Leave a comment below. Who's your power rankings? These are just one opinion based on watching a lot of games, a lot of eye test, along with going over some of the computer numbers. Let us know. Let us know where we were wrong. Everyone have a great rest of their week. Take care. We'll talk to you again either Friday morning or Saturday morning. So stay safe.